Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello.
All right. Okay, as we fill up in the lobby, we want to thank you all for returning to Conversations on Race and Policing. I am your student host, Marlo Brooks, as well joined by my co-host.
Hello, I'm Yvette Relles-Powell, student at CSUSB.
Perfect. This week, we have a very special, very important broadcast for you guys this week. We'll be talking about, we'll be doing a series on DACA, which is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals here in the States. So the way we like to kick things off, as you all know, those who are returning and for those who are new, we start off things by paying homage and showing respect to the land in which CSUSB sits on. So, and it goes, we recognize that California State University of San Bernardino sits on the territory and ancestral land of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians. We recognize that every member of the California State University of San Bernardino's community has benefited and continues to benefit from the use of occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1965. Consistent with our values of community and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationships to Native peoples. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold California State University of San Bernardino more accountable to the needs of American Indian and indigenous people. So we thank you. Real briefly, we're going to turn things over to Yvette, where we're going to talk about recent events, things that's going on today. So Yvette.
Hi, so this past week, 2 officers from Waycross, Georgia had fired their weapons several times at a car that was full of children. The children were wrongfully pulled over right up the street from their family home during a grocery store run. For no good reason, one of the elder siblings was bloodied in the face by an officer. The officers are under investigation now, thank goodness, while they are on administrative leave. The case has gained the attention of the NAACP, who have stepped in to advocate on behalf of the family, fortunately, since an investigation of a Georgia Police Department by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation does seem counterintuitive. Amnesty International, which is a global campaign against human rights violations, recently published their report of human rights violations against Black Lives Matter protesters. The victims of the violations range from medics to bystanders and reporters. Studies such as this have fueled demands for Congress to pass Protect Our Protesters Act, sponsored by Representative from Minnesota's 5th Congressional District, Ilhan Omar. So contact your congressional representatives and let them know how you want them to represent you. And that's all I have for you all this week. We're going to go ahead and turn things over to Maria Baranja. Thank you so much for being on with us. And she's going to give us a little bit of background on DACA.
Hello, everybody. My name is Maria Barragan, pronoun she, her, hers, ella. Some of you know me as Maria Maldonado. My name recently changed to Barragan. A whole nother immigration conversation we can have later, but not today. So I am going to give you a quick information on DACA, but before I do, please note that this is not legal advice. I am not an attorney, so I will provide an attorney information at the end of this presentation, but please note that. So we'll start with, what is DACA? So DACA was an executive action created in 2012 by Obama. In order to be eligible for DACA, you had to meet this eligibility criteria. So be under 31 years old as of June 15, 2012, came to the United States prior to reaching your 16th birthday, continuously present in the US prior to June 2007, physically present in the US on June 15, 2012 when the announcement was made, had no lawful status on June 15, 2012, are currently in high school, have graduated or obtained a GED, and have not been convicted of a felony. Now, this was all done thanks to the advocacy of undocumented folks. So I do want to recognize that the people who, called out Obama during his political campaigns. I know we do give a lot of credit to Obama, And yes, thank you, but we have to recognize that this was done through the work of undocumented activists. So documented students have benefited from DACA by having job opportunities, the opportunity to work on campus as student assistants. However, they are not eligible for work study. They have also had the opportunity to receive more scholarships, stipends, and internship opportunities. So when DACA was first effected was in September 5th, 2017. This was when DACA was first presented by 45's administration. And this meant that only those whose DACA was going to expire between September 5th, 2017 and March 5th of 2018 had until October 5th of 2017 to renew. USCIS was not accepting initial applications as of September 5th, 2017. However, based on a January 9th, 2018 federal court order, USCIS was asked to continue to accept renewal applications, but USCIS was still not accepting initial applications. So then what, right? We ask ourselves, what all the changes that are happening with DACA. So on November 12th of 2019, the Supreme Court heard the case on DACA. And a decision was expected on or before June 2020. The Supreme Court could have made one of these three decisions. One of them being that the Supreme Court concludes that the court may not review the 45 administration's decision to terminate DACA. The court concludes that it may review the administration's decision to terminate DACA and rules that the termination is unlawful. This is what we want. This is what we wanted. The court can conclude that it may review the decision and it decides the 45's administration termination of DACA is lawful. So basically ending the program. So what happened? In June, we received the news that Trump could not end the DACA program, right? And everything had to go back into effect as how it started in 2012. Now, we can say this is a big win, right? But let me break it to you. Not really. DACA continues to be under attack. The Department of Homeland Security released a memo last month, which states the following: no new initial request, so that means no new initial applications. Advanced parole, which is a program that came with DACA that allowed people to travel under three reasons, which was, medical reasons, it could be educational reasons, and employment purposes. So it was a parole. Basically, you were allowed to travel, and then they had the decision to make whether you returned back to the States or not. So now they're saying that advanced parole should only be granted to current DACA beneficiaries, and then it's only in exceptional circumstances, but they get to decide what this means. So whether we believe that this is an exceptional circumstance, USCIS gets to say yes or no. So they get to decide our, I guess our stories. And renewals are for 1 year rather than 2 years. And yes, you read that right. Now DACA folks have to renew way before, and it's only for 1 year and paying every year $495. So what does this really mean? I want to invite you to this Friday. We're going to have a conversation with our Carecen team, which are immigration attorneys, to talk more about what the DACA memo means. So please join us. This is your chance to learn more about what is happening with DACA. So how can the Undocumented Student Success Center assist you? We can provide referrals to immigration attorneys, provide free legal services through the CSU project. Again, I'm not the attorney, so you'll have the opportunity to make an appointment with our Carecen staff attorney. To make an appointment, here is the link. If you are a CSUSB student, faculty, staff, or immediate family member of one of the people mentioned, so students, faculty, staff, you can benefit from free immigration legal services. If you do have any other questions, feel free to contact me. This is my email, this is the center's phone number, or you can simply send an email to dreamers@csusb.edu. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. And if you can you please post that information for the link on Friday's event, as well as your contact info down in the chat for the attendees to later respond to. And also, I want to remind the attendees as we progress throughout this show to post any questions you may have down in the Q&A section for any of our panelists to expand on, if you would like. So we're going to continue throughout the show. My next guest up will be the one and only Daisy Ocampo.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, awesome. Thank you for having me here. Thank you to the group. Thank you to all the presenters, the panelists, and especially the students who we will hear from later on. A very special thank you to all of you for sharing your stories. My name is Dr. Daisy Ocampo. I am an assistant professor at the history department. Specifically, my specialization there is within public history. And for those of you that are not familiar with public history is really looking at cultural institutions such as museums, archives, preservation projects, but I think very specific to this talk is the role of oral histories in really creating narratives, and especially with dreamer narratives. I think that's very significant, and just wanted to share a little bit more about that. I know within our field, public history, which is essentially just looking to bring history and really pair it with public engagement, right? Whether it's through a monument, through a museum, through an exhibit, and really putting at the forefront, different voices. And, one of the aspects to my field in public history is really looking at whose history we are bringing to the public, right? So that when we think of history, I think we've been kind of broken down with, they are usually very colonial histories. They are usually not of people of color, right? So one of the directions within my field is to really highlight counter histories, to highlight community-based histories, to make sure that we are having different voices at the forefront within public spaces, within schooling, within museums. And so really these counter narratives, I think, are very invaluable, especially when we look at dreamers' narratives. These narratives, these stories really push back on this idea of the official histories and this assumption that they represent all of us, because they do not always represent us accurately, and definitely not thoroughly. So I think when I look at Dreamer and DACA testimonies, one of the things I am looking at least when I hear a lot of these narratives from students in higher education, is what histories are usually being silenced within US history. And I really like to highlight that. And I think when we look at Dreamer narratives, and I think in general immigrant narratives, one of the silenced histories, and I'm just going to mention two today. One of them is really looks at the assumption that people do not leave their families or homes of origin unless they have to. People leave out of necessity. And so, when I hear immigrant narratives, and I grew up in a mixed status family, right? So there were people who were undocumented and people who had papers. So I kind of heard, it was interesting because there's a lot of built-in inequality within my family, right? Because it was who could access and who could not access, right? And this really shaped our realities, right? It was the resources that we had at hand. And so when we look at these different immigrant narratives, one of the things I really like to focus on is contextualizing why people had to leave. And I think often we don't push that enough. But really, when we look at all the people who had to leave their countries of origin, it's usually because their countries of origin have been devastated by political, economic, and social forces that are really tied to the United States. So when we look, for example, at the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, when we look at the Bracero program, when we look at CIA-backed initiatives like the Mérida initiative in Mexico that's trying to combat narco violence, however, really militarizes, right, the police in Mexico. These are all reasons why people are fleeing, right? Because there are essentially American foreign policy has created so much inequality within home countries that people do have to leave. So I think there's something very significant to be said about that. I think also when we look at Central America, there is a time called the Banana Republic era. And this is when American businesses were pretty much setting up shop in Central America. And again, it was reconfiguring and changing the local economies that for so long were sustainable. They were very community-based, whether it was farming, but the point is it was safe and it was sustainable. And when you get these large businesses swarming in, this is where you start getting these really fragmented economies, right? And it's really changing the labor system. Again, people have to flee. If we look, for example, at the Guatemalan Civil War, right? This was, their authoritarian government was endorsed by the US government, right? And now there's tons of charges of human rights abuses, right? But as we look at the pattern of migration, this is all forced, and a lot of this is tied to the US. And so why do I bring this up? Because I think it's important that in these narratives, we really start to build in these accountability measures, right? So that it's not just, you know, we don't get stuck with these narratives that are either racialized, they're either criminalized, as we've seen with this political administration. We really need to contextualize why we're here. And really, secondly, I think one of the other very silenced histories to the US that I think dreamers and immigrant narratives in general bring forward is it really challenges this assumption about assimilation when you cross the border. So when you cross the border, that is your hazing process in a way, right? So you cross the border and you are told you have to become as much as possible an American looking citizen, right? You have to work a certain way, you have to look a certain way, you have to operate a certain way. And so really, I think in the past, I'll talk a little bit, just a bit about the undocumented and unafraid movement, because before it was really about trying to fit that model immigrant narrative, right? Like, hey, I work, I don't get in trouble. I mean, you have to be perfect to the T. And there is a reason for that, right? So you don't want to be racialized. You don't want to be policed. You don't want to be managed, because any of that can lead to a pipeline into deportation, right? And that's really at the forefront, is trying to stay low. And I think when, I know we've been talking a lot about Black Lives Matter, policing, I think that's a very powerful parallel with Black Lives Matter, because I think something they've been pushing on their agenda as well has been these politics of respectability, right? Here I am, a Black person in America, I'm working, I check all the boxes, right, of staying out of trouble, so I'm not racialized or criminalized, and yet it's still not enough, right? And that's a lot of the cases that we are seeing with police violence here in America. And so, you know, this is really, a lot of these ethics in the past have centered around having to prove your worth here in America so that you have a sense of belonging. And so one of the things I really appreciate about the undocumented and unafraid movement, as well as Black Lives Matter movement, is really finding a place of centering our voices and our histories, and no longer apologizing for who we are and for our place here, right? So, so I think that's a very powerful parallel with Black Lives Matter, as well as the undocumented and unafraid. And if any of you are interested, there's a scholar, her name is Jennifer Nahara from UCR. And I believe published one of her books, Undocumented and Unafraid. She has some really good material there. And really, I think that's what's so powerful, right? To be able to center immigrant stories from the beginning, right, till right now, and also centering the student experience within this conversation. So that's what I have to offer today. I'm really looking forward to hearing from student stories, student narratives, and yeah. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ocampo, for coming on and sharing your insight with us. It's always very good. Next, I want to introduce Nathan, who's going to share his perspective and from his experiences. Nathan, would you go ahead and share with everyone a little bit of your background, and you can go ahead and get into it.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for having me here. Thank you for allocating this time. And to start off, I would like to just piggyback off Daisy and what she said about immigrants. I am a DACA recipient. I am a student at CSUSB. But to piggyback off what Daisy said, I feel the reason to move forward is, and to not be afraid of whatever is happening right now. One, I give, thanks to the Undocumented Students Success Center, because when I went into school, I had no knowledge of how to apply for financial aid, how to get any kind of scholarships, any kind of help. And the Undocumented Student Success Center really helped me achieve my goal and graduate, almost close to graduating from CSUSB, which I'm really happy, I'm finally getting to do. And to piggyback off what Daisy said, it's because of people that were here before us. We're here already. They did the hard part. Like she said, if they left their country, their home country, they left their parents, it's for the better of us, to give us a better life. And that's the reason why I feel that even though there's things happening right now, our future is unsure. Like as Maria was saying right now when she was speaking with DACA, other things we're about to face, it doesn't compare to the things our parents faced coming here to the country with nothing. It doesn't compare to what our parents did, working 24-hour shifts, days on end, barely having enough food on the table, feeding us, and them suffering from hunger just so that we can be healthy. Nothing like what we're about to face compares to what our parents did for us, so which motivates me to keep on moving forward no matter what. And before DACA was implemented, I'm 29 years old, so DACA was implemented around 2007. Correct me if I'm wrong, Maria. It was implemented around 2007, so I was working beforehand, before DACA was ever in place. I went to college before DACA was ever in place, so I was working the car washes, graveyard shifts at the taco shops, just so I can pay for tuition. And DACA it's really gonna affect students if it's taken away. It does take away our security. It does take away a lot of benefits that we received. Our work possibilities will become lesser than what we have right now, as it is right now with this COVID situation. And then DACA being taken away, it is going to affect us, our security, our situation with our homes, especially if we are one of the ones that provide income in our homes. And there's just so much to go over, but I just want to thank you for this time. And if you have any questions, we're here to answer them.
Thank you, Nathan. I feel until DACA is stapled into this country's constitution, it's always going to be an eggshell walking contest for you guys, and that's never a comfortable seat to sit in. And but building accountability as pertaining to what Daisy mentioned earlier is the reason why we do have a DACA program now. So it's the continuing fight to keep our foot on the Constitution's neck, the government's neck, to make sure that everyone has a place here and a respectable place here. So I thank you guys for speaking on that manner. And we'll still circle around to you guys' story. Don't forget, guys, in attendance, please place any questions you may have in our Q&A section. If you have any questions pertaining to anything that our panelists are speaking on today. So we're going to continue this panel and this series. And next up, we are going to hear from another student recipient. We're going to hear from Betty.
Hi everyone, my name is Beatriz. I was one of the, I guess you would say, quote unquote, lucky ones. As soon as I was graduating high school, DACA came into place. So I have now been able to renew 4 times. With the new information and all the new updates, now I have only about a year left. And then who knows, right? It's always just kind of up in the air. But like Nathaniel said, you know, I'm just glad that we have these opportunities, but I always just circle back to my parents, and I can't help but think, you know, they are the original dreamers, and I see that a lot on social media, and it really is true. They're the ones who have made so many sacrifices. I'm also a part of a mixed status family. My 3 younger sisters are US citizens. I have DACA. My parents are undocumented. They have no status here. And so I think being in a family that is mixed status, it's always really scary. You always just kind of have that lingering of the unknown. You don't know what's going to happen. We have family in Mexico. You know, we've had to attend funerals over video cameras. We've had to, right now we're enduring my grandfather going through cancer. And it's devastating because you want to be there, but you know, you can't. And I think me personally, it's really heartbreaking seeing my parents go through it. Because I know that they want to be there, but they kind of ground themselves here for us, for their children. And that just really shows the sacrifices that they're willing to make. And these are the stories that I wish people would think about when they think about us, rather than just labeling us criminals or, you know, illegals, things like that. I guess something else that comes to mind when we talk about the dreamer narrative is also, we always have, you know, universities who, like Cal State, I am an alumni. I'm also a current graduate student, and I'm glad to be a part of a campus that supports us. Nathan and I were a part of a panel at a different university a few years back. And this particular university actually tried to censor us. They didn't want us to get political with our status, but how can you not? You know, how can we not speak about all these issues that affect us when DACA is political? Our lives are just affected by all of these laws that keep coming into play, and it's like they keep playing tug of war with us. 2017, when it was rescinded, that was when I was lucky to meet Maria, Nate, and Letty. And in college is where I was able to really join the movement and learn more. I haven't been as active now because of grad school, but it's really crazy to think that we don't learn about a lot of these resources until we get to higher education, if we're lucky enough to make it to higher education. Like Daisy said, a lot of us don't fit the perfect dreamer narrative. I definitely wasn't always a straight A student. So I think for me, that's one thing that I really want to be pushed out there is that we're not all straight A students. You know, we are just living our lives, and we want to be seen for that.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. We really appreciate you coming on here. And also best of luck to you, and huge props to you being in grad school and getting through that. What's really been sticking with me through what you all have been saying is I just really have to give amazing props to y'all for getting through school with this constant pressure that you all have mentioned of having to live up to the ideal or the perfect standard, having to fit into the perfect standard out of fear. And that's what's not right, is just this instant criminalization of a person, and then this instant over policing of that person's entire life based on your own biases. That's what we're not about. That's what we don't believe in. And so I just want to thank you all for being on here. I want to introduce next Leticia. If you could go ahead and share with us your background, your story, go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Leticia. I graduated from CSUSB last year, and I am an incoming graduate student. I am getting my master's in public administration, so I start in 2 weeks, and I'm very excited. But I'm also a DACA recipient. With the Supreme Court decision, I was very happy, not just because of myself, but also because I have a sister who was a potential first applicant. And now with the new decisions, it affects me in firsthand. I know that Maria mentioned something earlier about giving props to the community, and this is why we have DACA. I got my DACA in 2012. I was a sophomore in high school. So I always like to give credit to my mom, because she was the one who pretty much did all the paperwork. Back then, I was not really fully aware of how my status was going to affect me. So one day she was like, "Hey, you have an appointment. You're not going to school, and you're gonna go get your fingerprints." I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna go." But also during that year in 2012, when President Obama gave DACA, and this is something I don't share, but my dad was deported that same year. So I totally agree with Maria. And Beatriz, how can we not get political when our lives are depend on every decision? So I have been involved in the community. I have done press conference with Congressman Pete Aguilar. Right now, since it's an election year, we cannot vote, but I am involved in a campaign. I'm involved with Abigail Medina, who's running for state senate, and I'm just always trying to get involved and elect leaders who truly care for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Letty. I love Abby. I love Abigail. But thank you so much for sharing your story, students. That's what this is all about, is our narratives. You know, before we allow someone else to write ours, it's important for us to explain and share our own narratives with people, with the world. And as long as we have a voice, we have to shout from the top of every building, from the entrance of every room. We have to shout it. That's the only way we could truly fight and truly keep this on each other's mind. And it came up a few weeks ago, why Black Lives Matter, why not all lives matter. And we talked about how, you know, yes, all lives do matter. But when you say Black Lives Matter, that just furthers the issue of what's going on in our world, the years and years, the hundreds of years of oppression and injustice. So in reference of being in DACA status, you know, it's important to continue to scream and shout, and that's the only way to be heard. That's the only way to keep us in the top of in discussion. So Thank you very much for sharing that. I'm going to bring it back around to Maria, who briefly explained the content of DACA, if she want to further her narrative and give us any more.
Marlo, may I just go off script for just a moment? I'm
Yes, ma'am,
sorry, but
of course.
Daisy will have to leave, but I did ask her to talk a little bit about this myth that immigration, whether it's with papers or not, is bad for the country, and she agreed to do that but
Okay.
she has to leave. She has to leave in just a little bit, so I hope you don't mind.
No, not at all. Please,
Okay.
Daisy.
Thanks, Daisy. Mute.
How about that? Thank you. I'm sure there's a lot of ways to approach that question in terms of immigration is bad for this country. I would argue for the economic system that we have here, right, which is capitalism. The U.S. gains tremendously, so much profit. It's crazy. Anything from, you know, my uncles who would come live with us when they crossed the border, and you know, they're 17, 18. They didn't go to school. They started working immediately at factories, as gardeners, wherever they could, right? So they were really able to, you know, just start working off the bat. But what's more important is, I remember thinking, like, you pretty much finished close to your high school education in Mexico, right? That's all money that the U.S. didn't pay for in education, right? So the United States really gains a lot. They already have a person who is willing to work without having to invest in their education, right? So this is where you start getting a lot of this exploited class, racialized labor, right? So I'm also hesitant to say immigration is good on economic terms, because usually it's exploitative, right? It's not like you're here to work for a fair and decent labor. Often you have to make do without minimum wage. So I am hesitant on that point. But in terms of immigration, if we look at it historically, on my dad's side, we are indigenous, and we, in a lot of our creation stories, if we look at it from our perspective in history, the idea of moving, traveling as needed is probably one of the most normal human activities that we can do. What we are contending with is this border, right? So I think definitely the idea of people moving and the idea of people creating home elsewhere is something that we've been doing throughout time, all the time. People have married in, people have married out, and people travel, and you know, people move. So I know I kind of have that perspective, and you know, my approach is that movement can't be illegal. It just can't. And so, and definitely if we just look at it from a larger kind of political economic system, definitely the United States benefits a lot, not just in terms of money and profit, right? But as people, we bring in our own histories, we bring in our own beauty, we bring in our own assets. And you can't go wrong with that. And so that's talent that often doesn't get the opportunity to even make it to the table. So in that way, immigration is always beautiful. Immigration is always a dynamic, right? And it's always additive. It's never subtractive. And I think that's what has shaped a lot of this myth and this narrative around immigration is bad, right? It's very deficient based, and it can't be quantified that way.
Thank you, Daisy. Another one of our panelists that have to leave shortly to join another broadcast as well is Nathan. But I did want him to come back and speak speak on one of the foundations or organizations that he's a part of. If you could, Nathan.
Hello, yes. So one of the opportunities that DACA has allowed me to do right now is like something that Maria mentioned was it allows us a permit to work. Due in 2020, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Maria, a new law came into play where usually some undocumented people to work with 1099s. 1099s, when you don't get paid with a W-2, you don't get taxed out, and you probably don't need a work permit to work. But in 2020, now they're starting to verify, and other organizations are starting to, they need to have you on payroll, so they can't pay you with a 1099. So it shortens up who can work and who can't. And in 2020, they had to do a lot of cut downs on who can work for the organization. So something that DACA does help us students and other people who qualify for is allowing us a permit to work safely in the US. And DACA has helped me get a job at a SOL organization, which is just it's a community-based nonprofit organization based off San Bernardino. And our main goal is just to help community members become leaders in their community and further on help other individuals. It can be either just through Zoom meetings, creating Zumba classes, or just health, anything that has to do with the community, and SOL is there to help them out. Right now they're working with a program, with the Listos program, in which they're assisting and introducing to individuals how to be prepared in case we do have some kind of catastrophe. As right now, with COVID-19, many people were not ready for this. And that's what happened. That's why you would see the shelves at the stores being emptied out. People were not prepared. And it's always safe in case we do face a day-by-day catastrophe from one day to the next. We are sure that we have enough food in our homes and enough water to survive for a few days or weeks. So we're all prepared.
Thank you, Nathan. And now that we are having so many sporadic earthquakes, now California is under catastrophe warning or catastrophe watch. So it's great to see that these type of things are going on in the community, as well as with COVID-19. Mental health is a huge, huge, huge factor in our day-to-day now. So to have these different programs and things that's going on, I thank you for being a part of it and bringing it to the forefront for more people to know more about, and just to continue to stay healthy, stay positive, stay close to family right now in these times, and please stay educated. Take this time to just when Daisy spoke earlier about the history, it wasn't, for myself, it wasn't enough of the classroom experience to get the history of immigrants and things of that. It was me attending these exhibits and museums just on my own time to truly get that warm feeling of wow, like, and you really see a lot of similarities in the mistreatment of peoples here in America. So I encourage you all to, if you do see any exhibits or webinars and things like that, where you get a chance to learn your history of any ethnicity, take that initiative, take that opportunity to do so. You'll be surprised at the similarities and just things that we all have gone through. And the people before us, I can imagine the times with my parents and my great grands, and and to see us now, there's still so many injustices and biases going on in today's time. It's like, wow, how far did we really get? But as long as we're young, we're able to fight where they left off. So that's what we're here for. All right, Maria, I'm bringing it back to you.
Thank you. So I was a DACA recipient. I am now a resident. Kind of still waiting for USCIS to make a decision on my case. I received my residency through marriage, but like I shared earlier, it was a whole nother conversation on immigration, right? Because a lot of times we hear like, just get married. You'll fix your status if you just get married. You'll be fine. Marry a US citizen. But that comes with a lot of heavy work. It's a lot of heaviness in our hearts, in our mental health, because we are constantly having to make that person happy, right? We are constantly worried about that person being content with us. We can fight with that individual because we feel like we are giving them this power over us, right? This decision of, you know, without them, my situation won't be fixed, right? So then we allow for abuse to happen, physical, mental, verbal, financial. So that's what I'm saying. Like, that's a whole nother immigration topic that we can potentially have one day, right? But focusing on DACA, I also come from a mixed status family. My immediate family, they're undocumented. My brother is DACA. My other sibling was deported on my 18th birthday. My sister has had to self-deport in order to pursue education. And that's why for me, it's so important to bring awareness about the first activists, the people who first started this undocumented and unafraid movement, because it's because of them that we've had this policy changes, right? That we've had DACA, that we've had 8540, the California Dream Act. Thankfully, we are in a state that allows us to have these opportunities to pursue higher education. It's important for us to understand that even though some DACA recipients don't pursue higher education, that they are still worthy, that they are still valued, right? And then recognizing our parents, the work that our parents have done, the work that our parents continue to do, and how political people continue to criminalize them. And they criminalize them by saying they brought them when they were young, right? That is the most popular phrase we hear when people are introducing policies on immigration. When people want to defend, you know, your perfect dreamer, when people want to introduce policies to replace DACA, that reasoning is always, well, they were brought here when they were young. They didn't have a choice. Some of us had a choice. Some of us understood what migrating to the US meant. Some of us, our parents were very transparent with us, and they explained to us what this means, right? This is what the process is gonna look like. For people that say, well, why didn't you come here legally? Some of us tried. We were denied multiple times, and we had to find another route, right? For me, my dad was already living in the United States, so my mom wanted us to be all together. And one way or another, we were going to be united. Little by little, like I shared, my family has been separated. We've been affected by the immigration system. So for me, it's really important to work and highlight the voices of undocumented students. I care a lot about the educational aspect of immigration, just because I was always told that being undocumented, I wasn't gonna have the opportunity, right? I graduated high school back in 2010 when there was very limited resources. So for me, that's why my passion is in education, but we also have to understand that there's other aspects of immigration that are important to also talk about, like health for all, right? Undocumented people don't get healthcare benefits unless your employer provides them. But highlighting the different intersectionalities, because undocumented doesn't just mean Latinx, right? There are folks who are also undocumented and Black. There are folks who are undocumented and members of the LGBTQ community. They are individuals who are undocumented and, you know, they have a disability, right? How are we making being successful for them? Especially, again, being undocumented, not having health care, but then you have a disability, then how do you have access to obtaining the tools that you need? Then just the list goes on. But for me, it's important, again, to recognize the work that others before me have done. I have always been aware of my undocumented, right now my unsure of what USCIS is gonna say. On my case, right? Unsure, I am an unsure resident, but really paying attention to the history and the movements that have come before us, and no longer allowing politicians to criminalize our parents, and if anything does pass, to ensure that they include our parents, because it's because of them that we are here, that we have better opportunities, that we have a better life. And yeah, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A.
Well, I'm just full of questions myself. I'm sorry, Yvette. No, okay. Could you all, each of you, going around the horn, talk a little bit about Border Patrol and how that affects or does not affect your life? Because this is a series that we're doing on race and the police, right? And law enforcement, criminal justice or injustice. So, I mean, you don't have to, but if you feel comfortable, could you talk a little bit about Border Patrol?
I guess I can start. For me personally, Border Patrol, it's not something we see close to San Bernardino or like the, I guess where I'm from, which I grew up in Montclair. So, I always joke when people tell me, go back home, I'm like, okay, let me go back to Montclair. 30-minute drive, right? That's home to me. I mean, Mexico's home to me too, but we'll leave both. I can have two homes. But we didn't really see Border Patrol, or I didn't grow up seeing Border Patrol. But for me, my family always told me to avoid the areas where Border Patrol is, like San Diego, right? Don't go to San Diego. You can't go to San Diego. And I didn't get the opportunity to go to San Diego until I was the DACA recipient, and my parents felt more comfortable of me going anywhere near where Border Patrol would be. Now, my fear was more on the police, because police does work with ICE, and it does work with those agencies that separate families, right? It's especially driving without a driver's license, because I had to experience that, and so did my family members. And always, whenever we had to go somewhere, it was like, well, may God protect you, right? Putting it in God's hands, or whatever higher power we believe in, to make sure that they get home safely. Because if you got pulled over, there was that possibility that you would be detained. And if you're detained, you are fingerprinted. And if you're fingerprinted, they know you're undocumented, and then you go into ICE custody. And then once you go into ICE custody, sometimes you are forced to self-deport, because then they start telling you that you don't have a case, that why even bother? And that's something that happened with my brother. It's like, why even bother? You don't have a case. And it's like, okay, well, I'm self-deporting. And then your family just gets that call of like, hey, this is my goodbye, right? Living in my neighborhood, one time, like, the police came into our home thinking that we had like drugs, right? And I guess it was somewhere in my neighborhood, but because we live in a corner house, that's where the business was being, I don't understand that. But I came out of my room and I see my dad, like they had him with his hands behind his back, right? And they were about to like, I don't know what they were gonna do. I was young, I didn't understand the process. And I wanted to cry. Like for a moment, I thought it was ICE. I was like, oh my God, I'm not gonna see my dad anymore. What is happening here, right? Or when people knock on your door and it's like a heavy knock, it's right away looking like, who is it? Who's knocking, right? Because it can potentially be ICE, an ICE agent. So that is my experience.
I can go next. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'll speak real quick. Like I mentioned earlier, my dad was deported in 2012, and he didn't have a driver's license. And then after that, he was 2 years in Arizona in a ICE detention, and then after that, he self-deported. So yeah, I'm also from the Coachella Valley, and I moved to San Bernardino for school. But growing up, we pretty much lived with Border Patrol. We're within those 100 miles, so sometimes you're just getting coffee and there's a Border Patrol next to you. So I did understand, I think one of the questions was at what age, since I was 7 years old. I was 7 years old when I came to the US. Since I was 7 years old, I knew that that was a possibility that my family could get separated.
I can go next and answer the second question. You know, when it comes to having witnessed Border Patrol or DHS on campus, I think that that's something that a lot of us can relate to, is experiencing that fear and that, you know, uncertainty, like, oh my goodness, what are they doing on campus? You know, are they going to, you know, so many things go through your head, like, are they going to question us? Are they going to start profiling everyone who fits that description? And I personally, I don't really understand why campuses, you know, bring these law enforcement officials on campus, because as much as they say that, you know, they support us and they are here for us, I don't know how, you know, how do they take into account these types of experiences that we go through when we see these agencies on campus? And, you know, this panic and this fear that we experience when we see these things are very real, because we don't know what they're there for. So that's just something to think about as well.
Thank you all very much for sharing. I wanted to go ahead and get into a couple of Q&A that we have here. So from one of our attendees, they say, talking about Border Patrol, what do you think about CSUSB and or the Career Center working with Border Patrol? This person says that they have seen them on campus and experienced the panic attacks when they saw them next to the USSC at a career fair. And I believe one of our panelists just touched on this briefly. If you all wanted to go ahead and get further insight, if anyone else wanted to respond.
I can respond. I totally agree with Beatriz. The way how I see it is that campus has said that they support us, but at the same time, it's kind of ironic to have these agencies come to our campus and recruit. That way they can later on go into our communities and destroy our families or terrorize us. I feel like often there's this idea, like, you're on campus, you're safe, but we don't live 24/7 on campus. So what happens when we're not there?
Maria or Beatriz, would you like to respond further at all?
I guess I can share the experience from students, because the career fair did happen near where the Undocumented Student Success Center is located. We are really close to the event center, right? So that's something that we couldn't really avoid, and I didn't know that it was happening until students started calling me and telling me, Maria, like, I see Border Patrol cars, and I'm like, oh my God. And my instinct was, close the door. Everybody come in and close the door. I don't care who knocks. If it's a student, they have to call before coming in. I didn't know what to do at that moment, right? I was not prepared, but then I had to take a step back from that fear and say, wait, even though they're on campus, there are certain rules, certain policies that I have to remember, right? Like knowing my rights of, they can't just ask me for any student's information unless they have like a warrant, or, you know, or if they ask me for information, I just have to call campus police. I know another area that's a little problematic sometimes, but it's like they all take care of referring them to the right people, right? So this issue was addressed with the campus president, Dr. Tomas Morales, and we did ask, like, hey, what steps can we take? I know that because we are a campus, like we maybe can avoid them coming into campus. Like as much as I wish we can not welcome them into our campus, I don't really understand the whys of why we have to allow them in. That's something I'm still trying to learn, right? But it's like, what other steps can we take? Can they come in on our marked card? Can they come in through the back? Can they not wear their uniforms, right? Come in as regular, we're just here to recruit people. Like, why do they have to do these things? So really ensuring to take the necessary steps to ensure that our students don't feel that anxiety that comes with seeing Border Patrol. But again, I'm not really able to address the whys of why they come to campus. I'm still learning that.
Maria, I wasn't sure if you expanded upon it earlier in the show. Can you explain how the Dreamers Act and DACA and the DACA program correlate with each other?
So they don't really go hand in hand. So the Federal Dream Act, if I have my dates correctly, was first introduced in 2001, then again in like 2010, and then again in 2017. So this is how the Dreamer narrative started, right? Because it was basically political representatives coming together to write this bill that said, if you have a 3.0 GPA, if you have been here since you were this age, right? It was a list of certain requirements. You were going to have a path to citizenship. So you were going to become a resident and then hopefully later on a US citizen. So a lot of people confuse the DREAM Act with DACA because a lot of the eligibility requirements are very similar, but they're completely different things. DACA just protects, you can say protects those who benefit from DACA in the sense that it defers them from deportation. It doesn't mean that they're not quote unquote deportable. It just means you are being placed at the end of the deportation line. So you are granted that bit of protection. But the DREAM Act was going to provide that path to citizenship. So it has continuously been reintroduced. It continues to fail. So what happened was one of the campaigns, political campaigns, when Obama was trying to be reelected, one of the undocumented and unafraid activist, Yu Hong, called him out. He went in as a quote unquote guest, and then out of nowhere he stands up and he's like, Obama, stop deporting dreamers. And all of a sudden, like, he took action and introduced DACA, right? The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And it's like, oh, so you did have that power to do something, but you waited this long, right? And now you're being so strategic in doing it now that you are asking to be reelected. And I'm not saying Obama was such a bad person. Like, I'm not saying that because I know a lot of people do admire him. And personally, there are things to admire from him. But we also have to keep in mind that we have to recognize the bad that people do and hold people accountable to the bad that they do. Recognize that, right? Because Obama's administration also deported the highest number of undocumented individuals through the Trust Act, which allowed police officers to work with ICE agents. So really, again, recognizing what political figures have done and continue to do when it comes to immigration. So again, I hope I was clear enough in how they are different, but again, a lot of people compare them just because of the eligibility requirements being very similar, and that's how this whole dreamer narrative is created.
Just real quick, Yvette, it's also really expensive to become a citizen, isn't it? Through DACA.
So through DACA, you don't really have and again, this is not legal advice, okay?
Yeah.
I'm not an attorney. But through DACA, you really don't have that path to citizenship. So unless you have other ways, someone that can sponsor you, then you can potentially have that path to citizenship. But being a DACA recipient, it's really hard to have that path. But it's silly, I guess that's the term I can use, how people who suffer from any type of abuse, physical, domestic violence, they can get potentially that path to citizenship. And it's like, dang, like we have to go through that in order to have that path to citizenship. It doesn't make sense, right? Why? Why do we have to be physically abused by someone to be considered worthy of that path? And I say potentially we can have that path because there has been cases that if it wasn't reported to the police, people that we are afraid of, then potentially it's like there's no proof. How can you prove that there was abuse, right? If you are sexually assaulted, if there's no proof, who's gonna believe you? But do we wanna call the cops? That's the scary process because it's like, if I call the cops, I can get fingerprinted, and if they see that I'm undocumented, they can potentially blame me, right? And it goes into, again, this idea of like, well, people telling you, well, get married. Yes, you can potentially become a citizen if your partner, your significant other can sponsor you if they're a US citizen, but there's also requirements that they have to meet, right? And it's like, okay, well, now you're placing all your worth on this individual, and it's a process.
Right. I mean, as a citizen, we often ask why as well. I mean, my child can come home from school the same exact time every single day, and one day she doesn't show up, and I call the police and they tell me I can't even file a report until 3 days, and that's just why, you know. So just many flaws, many errors in our constitution and our judicial system that just leave us all out in the rain, you know. It doesn't protect us as much as we would think and we would hope for in any emergency or danger or anything. So when I spoke about it being expensive, so it isn't a one-time thing. It's almost like a recertification every few years or something. Oh, that's what it was. Wow.
It really depends. I'll share my personal process. So like I said, I became a resident through marriage. So I had to pay attorney fees, which was like close to $3,000. And that's because I got a friendly discount. That's not including the application fees. So depending on the applications that you have to submit, there's fees to that. That can range anywhere between like $500 to like $1,000. And the fees are actually increasing sometime soon. I forget the date, but they're increasing. Because I was married less than a year, like when I filed, less than 2 years, I'm sorry, I was granted residency for 2 years. And what that meant was that I had to stay married and prove to USCIS that I was still married and in love before that expiration date. So by then I had to like go to an attorney because we have to be very careful. Like we have to go to an immigration attorney. Like please do not go to anybody else if they're not a certified immigration attorney. You can check in the state bar, like on the website, Google their name, make sure that they are trustworthy. But you know, I had to pay again another fees to renew my residency card and then wait for USCIS to make a decision. While USCIS is making a decision, then I have to, and when it's time to apply for citizenship, then I have to hire an attorney again, pay the filing fees, and then wait for USCIS to make a decision whether I am worthy of citizenship or not. Well, actually, whether I'm worthy of a test, right? Because I have to take a test before I am eligible to become a citizen. So it's a lengthy process, costly, and like I said, I'm sharing probably a lot of my personal life, and I'm sorry, TMI, but this is, I guess, my chance, right? Because my relationship didn't work out. So I was like scared of like what's gonna happen. Am I still able to apply if I can't prove that I'm in love and that like how do I prove to USCIS that I'm still worthy to allow me to continue to stay in the United States? So again, I had to hire an attorney to be able to process that and say, hey, USCIS, this is my case. This was my experience while being in this marriage. Like, please forgive me, right? Like, forgive me for being a survivor. Basically, that's what you're saying. And now it's that waiting game. My residency did expire before any notice came in the mail. And I was like, well, what does this mean? Does it mean that I'm undocumented again? Like, oh my God. So thankfully, I received the notice like a few days later. And it was like, okay, here's an extension of your residency for 18 months, and then just wait for a decision.
Thank you so much again for sharing with us, Maria. I wanted to go back and touch on something that you brought up a little while ago and open this up to all of our panelists to talk about as well. In this current climate, the way that we view our relationship with police and the way that we view how other people should interact with the police is very different. And especially right now, the conversation revolves a lot around what you shouldn't be calling the police for. And I wanted you all to, if you're comfortable, open up about how this has, how this sort of reaction might have, how you might have interacted with this behavior before, if this is something that you've already, or you or people that you know have already had to take into consideration the different reasons why you cannot reach out to police officers, or why in your community you feel that you are not safe reaching out to police officers. If you could just touch on that a little and how it relates to just how people are considering the way that they reach out to police officers now.
I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier about as DACA recipients, we feel like we have that added layer of protection, but our parents don't. Our parents are terrified of the police. They're terrified of ICE. So anytime they leave home, it's kind of like a gamble to them. And, they are always just being so cautious and extra careful of their every move. I have been in the car with both of my parents, and they could just see a cop car next to us, and you can just feel them tense up. You can see them they just grab the steering wheel even harder because they don't want to make any wrong moves. So I want to say, if something were to happen to us, I don't think it's very easy for us to want to call the police because of that fear. Because you call them, yeah, they may solve your issue, but what if it's a racist police officer? Then you are going to be profiled, and they do have a relationship with ICE. So then you may end up in a center like Adelanto, and where you end up there for months. I was volunteering with an organization, and we were able to go visit a man who was detained there, and he had been there for months. And it's so devastating to see, because they just end up waiting for months, and the treatment of these people inside these detention centers is just terrible, and of children. And so we think ahead of all of these things before we even decide to call 911. So that's just a little bit on that.
To add on to what Beatriz mentioned, I feel like that is people who are undocumented, they don't call the police. That's why they don't report crimes that they might suffer. Um, for example, I have witnessed like people I know that sometimes, someone breaks into their car and they're not going to report that. It's just, they'll fix whatever they have to fix, but they will not call the cops.
I think that also ties back to a lot of other issues, like Letty mentioned, victims of sexual assault, they don't report it. Victims of domestic violence, they definitely are not reporting it. It intersects with a lot of other issues, and it's just scary for us. So no, we're not very quick to call law enforcement.
Probably should say at this point, though, thank you for mentioning domestic violence, Beatriz. I am on the board of Option House, which you know, and we do not have an interface with ICE. We get our clients from different places. Many times the police actually do bring them in, but there is no cooperation at all. So if anyone in the sound of my voice, or someone, just have them contact Option House, and we'll arrange for you to get to the shelter, and we will, we'll protect you. Most of the women that we have in the shelter, as I'm speaking now, are actually, and we don't even ask about their status, but many of them are Spanish speakers. So we are definitely not in that mode, if you will, by calling ICE.
Thank you both for sharing with me and sharing with all of us your personal stories. I know it's not always safe having to speak out, and I'm really grateful and thankful that you all have expressed to us that you're able to share with us and that you feel safe enough. That's amazing. I also did want to go ahead and ask one more question. If you all could speak a little bit to how, and I think you did touch on it just slightly, but if you could all speak a little bit to how this has impacted education and your experience learning, and even if you would want to speak beyond your experience, if you would want to speak just a little to your own community or people who might identify with what you're going through, how it might affect their journey on to education and obtaining their degrees.
I guess I'll start, and this is my way of connecting it to the policing, right? Back when I started even considering college, I attended Chiefy Community College, but I had to take the bus, right? Wake up at 5 a.m. and it's like, take the bus because you're not driving. My parents were like, you're not driving, you can get pulled over, you can get arrested, again, you can get deported just for the simple act of wanting to go to school. So figure it out. If you want to go to school, we'll buy you a bus pass, and that's how you'll attend school. So it was a daily routine of waking up at 5 a.m. to be able to get to class at 8 in the morning. But I'm grateful that I had that opportunity, right? It wasn't until my third year at Chiefy that my dad was open to the idea of getting me a car, and that was because I had to drive a little bit further out as I was in the process of transferring to another university. And even then, my dad gave me the option of like, you have to go close to home. It's either Cal State San Bernardino or Cal Poly Pomona. And I was like, San Bernardino is far away, right? And it wasn't that, it was a 30-minute drive. But for me, that was far enough. So I decided to attend Cal State San Bernardino, the only school I applied to. And again, it was that drive, my first year to Cal State without a driver's license and having that fear of oh my God, there's a cop behind me. Okay, drive safe, lower the music, don't have the music too loud, right? And all my life, I even thought that having like the light on, I don't know what it's called, but you know, that light on top of your, I thought that was illegal. It's not. My parents lied to me. But the reason why it was to avoid calling that attention, right? Because it's like avoid attention at all costs. Even having something hanging from your rear view mirror, my parents were like, that's illegal. And it was like, no, I mean, I still don't know if it is. But it was their way of protecting us and telling us, this is how you avoid the police. Right. But despite it all, I graduated and I did, you know, I had DACA. I was thankful. I'm thankful for that opportunity that I was able to benefit from DACA, right? But then I think of people like my sister who didn't have DACA, who doesn't have DACA, who has not benefited from DACA, and she just recently received her master's, and like she's some marriage and family therapist, right? And she's in the process into launching her own business. Why? Because undocumented people are hustlers, they're entrepreneurs, and they're always going to find a way to make things happen. So I think of those stories. I think of the documented people that came before me, who did it before me, and I use that as some motivation, right? So while DACA is constantly under attack, while there's people who say, well, I'm undocumented, I don't qualify for DACA, you know what, let me tell you something. You don't need DACA to go to school. You can tell anybody, all your high school counselors, all your community college counselors, Maria told me that I don't need DACA, right? And you can always come to me and we will walk you through the process of pursuing higher education, if that is your goal. If that is not your goal, if you wanna start your own business, hey, by all means, that is worthy of everything, and I will connect you to the right resources.
You all are true warriors to be able to champion your degrees while facing these different mental issues and day-to-days. I've been fighting for the Black and Brown cause since 2014, before I even understood Brown truly, truly understood the backgrounds and the similarities and all the things we've all faced in education and society and in housing and in business and work. Before I even really knew the side of Brown, I was fighting for it. And just hearing you guys speak today just ignites that passion to continue to scream loud for Black and Brown lives in our country and our communities. So I'm just sitting here smiling while you guys are talking, but I'm just like, wow, you really are pushing me to go further and truly clearing what it is I'm fighting for as well. So I thank you guys for sharing. As we continue to push through the show, I hope you guys are still enjoying all the attendees that are still in. Don't forget, Q&As are opening again, and I always explain Q&As aren't only about what the panelists are discussing today. If you have any questions concerning your community or today's issues and things like that, please place them down below, and we can tackle them as best as we can. But as we continue to go further, we're just having an open discussion. This is a safe space that the CSUSB students provide for our panelists to discuss things with our community, with our campus community. So we're just continuing the conversation on race and police and with the Undocumented Student Success Center and undocumented student recipients of the DACA program. So just wanted to, that was a brief commercial.
I just like to say, as we're winding down, you all are fierce. I just have to underscore what Marlo and Yvette have been saying. I know, Beatrice, when I contacted you, you were a little like, oh, what? As well as Maria, but I just so appreciate you all putting your lives on the line. And, you know, the value of this talk today and this discussion today is that, you know, I've been a professor on campus for many, many years, and I learned so much about, today, I learned so much about DACA and about how I should, or if a student approaches me, you know, the right answers, and the right answer is always Maria, go to Maria. But I do believe that, you know, we're going to post this on the YouTube, the history department's, the history club's website. And this is going to be valuable for other professors, other staff on campus in terms of how to serve our DACA students, because it's so important. And I think you all have really conveyed the fear of, you know, the 24/7 fear of getting that knock on the door, or getting pulled over, or getting, you know, whatever. You know, that I just can't even imagine living like that. And so you all have very thick skins, and I so appreciate you, and I love you more today, Beatriz, than I ever have. And you've been a student of mine, and a TA, and a friend for a long time. So I truly, truly appreciate you. I truly appreciate you, Maria. And we're going to post this, and we're going to get the word out that that this is something important. This is something that is important for all of us to know about, and we've got to protect each other. It is not black against white or black against brown. It is all of us in this together, and I think we're going to see some. Yvette is going to be reporting more and more good news every week as we make these strides, you know, with our demonstrations and with our discussions. There's a podcast that I would like to recommend, and to, you know, have it on record. It's called Beyond the Bastards, and it's not as bad as it sounds. And it's this last 2 weeks, they've done a really, really good analysis, history of Border Patrol. And I have learned so much from that podcast that I've had to rewind it and take notes and all of that. But we should know, you know, we know a lot about the police, municipal police departments, but, you know, ICE and Border Patrol are something that's sort of, as Maria talked about, it's removed from us because, you know, we don't live at the border. But I think this podcast is really, lays it all out. He's a comedian, but he's also very, very smart. So I highly recommend it, and I'm going to actually listen to it again too. Because, you know, the more we know, as NBC says, you know, the more you know, the stronger you are. So we appreciate you all so much for coming today.
Yes. Thank
Wrap
you,
it up,
Mary.
Marlo?
That's right. So yeah, new podcast alert, Beyond the Bastards. Go check it out.
Yeah.
I want to also, it was something I was just going to say. I can't believe I just forgot it.
I'm sorry.
It was, oh, okay. No, I got it.
It's called Behind the Bastards. Behind the Bastards.
Behind the Bastards.
Yeah.
Got it.
I may have said beyond. I'm sorry.
Okay. And earlier, someone referenced catching up on recent or previous weeks' conversations on race and policing. So yes, we are uploading. We're doing our best to give you guys the greatest quality videos, so you can go back and check out everything. So don't worry, you will see more. If you only see 6 sessions up so far, 6 weeks up so far, you will see more coming in very soon. These last few months have been amazing in content, in discussion, with our guests, with our hosts, with the background people who always keep us up, keep us live, keep us going. So we truly appreciate you guys tuning in every week. We truly appreciate you guys returning every week. We truly appreciate you guys spreading the word to get others to tune in. This has truly been an amazing experience from the student standpoint. And we're here. We're going forward, and we're going to do our best to continue this show and continue to give you the latest and greatest on what's going on in our world and how we're going to continue to push forward through this pandemic, through this crisis, through it all. So with community, we shall overcome. And that's what we're all about, bringing together community, bringing together worldviews, bringing together different backgrounds, history, education. That's what we're here for. So Mary told us a few weeks ago that we're going to stop fighting. We're going to stop using the term fighting. What was the term we're going to start using, Mary?
You want me to remember 2 weeks ago?
Oh yeah,
I can't even
I
remember this
forgot.
morning.
I thought you had pinpointed it so well. I was like, oh yeah, I gotta start
Yeah,
saying
you all
fighting.
thought it was a great idea, but I don't
Yeah,
even
I
remember
forgot.
it
Okay, I'm gonna
now.
go back 2 weeks and find it. I'm gonna start saying it. So as we wrap up today, I'm gonna pass things over to my co-host, the
You want
lovely
to talk
Yvette.
about next week?
Yes, Yvette's gonna take us right into it.
Okay, fantastic.
If I may quickly add, before
Yes,
Yvette, you talk about next week as we are closing, I do want to use this space to also challenge people to also start caring about other communities, right? Because a lot of times our focus is on Black and Brown communities, but we also have to learn more about our indigenous communities and how they are being impacted and continuously affected. Our LGBTQ community, our trans brothers and sisters, right? How they are constantly affected. A lot of our issues intersect, right? There are undocumented people who are trans, who are in detention centers, who are, undocumented trans Black people in detention centers, right? They are also survivors, and there's just so many issues that intersect. So I do invite people to, if you care about Black lives, if you care about immigrant folks, right? If you care about DACA, you should also care about other communities who have been affected by the policing of, or the different systems, like even the educational system, all the opportunities that they are not given. So really educating ourselves, if we are cis people, as simple as using pronouns and normalizing the use of pronouns. There's different little things that we can do that cost us $0 to bring awareness of all the different communities that are constantly affected and constantly attacked. So that is my invitation to you all, my challenge to you all, because a lot of times I've seen, when the Black Lives Matter movement really hit like social media, and people saying, like Latinx folks saying things like, well, they should show up the way that, when kids were in cages, and it's like, y'all, they were there. Our Black community was there. They showed up. Why? Because undocumented or immigrant issues are also a Black issue, right? Like I said, this is undocumented doesn't just mean Latinx. Undocumented means you are from like different places of the world, right? And that you identify with different other identities, like you identify as undocuqueer, right? So really recognizing that and working together, coming together to dismantle all the systems that oppress us. Again, that can include education, because a lot of times we forget that we go back and look at the history of education, right? It wasn't made for us. So recognizing that. But thank you so much for having me.
Well said, Maria. Well said.
If I can,
Yes.
sorry, if I can just add to what Maria said, I think when it comes to social justice, it's important to not pick and choose, what issues you are going to fight for, because they all intersect. I went to Washington when they were trying to pass the DREAM Act the last time, and there was the Black undocumented community. There was Asian Pacific Islanders. There was just literally people from all over, and you know, they really showed up for us. So when, you know, other issues show up, we need to do the same. And there was a really great activist that I can't remember her name right now, but she said something and it's always stuck with me. And she said in her speech at one of the rallies, she said, if I'm not free, you're not free. And if you're not free, I'm not free. So that's always really just stuck in the back of my mind. And just any social justice issue that there is, they just always come together, and they always come hand in hand, because at the end of the day, we're all humans.
And that's a very scary thing for the powerful. J. Edgar Hoover said, you know, the worst thing that can happen in this country is if Black people started cooperating with each other, right? That's why the FBI tried every way it could to separate African Americans. But imagine, you know, look at those demonstrations. There, you know, there's brown faces, there's white faces, there's Black faces, there's, you know, everybody is out there. And I think that is what is scaring, you know, the forces that don't want us to be together, that don't want us to show up for the kids in cages, and that don't want us to show up for Black Lives Matter. So this is an attempt. What we're doing and what we, I think, have done successfully today is to show that, you know, all of our problems are connected. And you know, you spoke like a true sociologist, Beatrice, when you said intersection, because they all intersect with each other, right? You know, we're all on that road together. So good luck to everyone, especially our DACA folks, and we wish you the best. And thank you so much for being with us today. Yvette, you want to take us out?
Yeah, just a quick update on what we're going to be going over next week. Hopefully you all can make it in for this conversation as well. We will be screening the film Profile, The Mothers of Murdered Black and Latino Youth, and we'll just be having a conversation about Black and Latinx youth who did suffer at the hands of NYPD, and the mothers who are driving the change and driving the demands for justice for their children. I want to go ahead and thank our panelists for their closing remarks. Thank you everyone for sitting in on the conversation, and you all have a great rest of your week, and hopefully you can make it back with us next week to continue the conversation. And yeah, you all have a great one. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.